Tyler Brooks pushed his cleaning cart down the polished corridor of the Eternal Dominion, the massive flagship that housed Emperor Vexna and his entire royal court. The wheels squeaked slightly, a sound that always made the Valkyrie guards curl their lips in disgust. Tyler had learned to keep his eyes down and his movements quiet. That was the secret to surviving as a human on an alien warship. The Valkyrie were massive creatures, standing nearly 8 feet tall with scales that shimmered like oil on water. They were warriors, conquerors, beings who had crushed a dozen civilizations under their boots. And humans? Humans were the help. They cleaned the floors, fixed the plumbing, cleared the waste disposal systems. Nothing more. Tyler didn't mind the work itself. He'd been a janitor back on Earth too, working night shifts at an office building in Detroit. At least here the pay was decent, and he got to see the stars. But the constant mockery wore on him. Every day brought new insults, new reminders that he was considered less than nothing. Today was supposed to be different though. Today Tyler had planned to stay completely out of sight. The Emperor was hosting a grand ceremony, welcoming ambassadors from 3 neighboring systems. The throne room would be packed with nobility, all dressed in their finest armor and jewels. Tyler had explicit instructions to avoid that entire section of the ship. But then the call came through on his communicator. Waste backup in Corridor 7, right next to the throne room. Someone had to fix it immediately, and Tyler was the only maintenance worker on that deck. He grabbed his tools, loaded up his cart with cleaning supplies, and headed toward the problem. The corridor was already starting to smell. Tyler worked quickly, disconnecting the panel and clearing the blockage. It took 20 minutes of dirty, uncomfortable work, but he got the system flowing again. He was just packing up his tools when he heard the announcement echoing from the throne room. The ceremony was starting early. Tyler knew he should wait. He should stay put until the procession passed. But the smell in the corridor was getting worse, and he needed to get his cart back to the storage area before the cleaning chemicals started eating through the seals. He made a calculation. If he moved quickly and quietly, he could slip past the throne room entrance before anyone noticed. He was wrong. Tyler had just reached the massive doorway when his cart wheel caught on an uneven floor plate. The cart lurched sideways, and before he could stop it, the whole thing tipped over. Bottles crashed to the floor. His mop clattered against the marble. And worst of all, the cart itself rolled directly into the throne room, coming to rest about 15 feet from Emperor Vexna himself. The entire room fell silent. 300 pairs of eyes turned to stare at Tyler, frozen in the doorway with his hands still outstretched from trying to catch the cart. Emperor Vexna sat on his crystalline throne, his golden robes flowing around him, his face a mask of absolute disbelief. Then the Emperor started laughing. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a brief moment of amusement. It was a deep, booming laugh that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. The kind of laugh that said he just witnessed the funniest thing in his entire life. This, Vexna bellowed, gesturing at Tyler with one clawed hand, this is humanity's contribution to our great empire. Look at him. A cleaning creature who cannot even manage his own equipment. The nobles around him joined in the laughter, the sound washing over Tyler like a wave. Tyler felt his face burning, but he kept his expression neutral. He'd learned that showing emotion only made things worse. He walked calmly into the throne room, ignoring the pointing fingers and mocking voices, and grabbed his cart. The wheel was bent now, so it dragged even worse than before as he pulled it back toward the door. Perhaps we should commission a statue, one of the ambassadors suggested, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The human and his mop. A testament to their species' ambitions. More laughter. Vexna wiped tears from his eyes. Yes. Let it be known across the galaxy. When humans reach for the stars, they reach with cleaning supplies. He was practically howling now, his whole body shaking with mirth. Tyler reached the doorway and paused. For just a moment, he looked back at the Emperor. Their eyes met. Tyler saw nothing but contempt there, the absolute certainty that humans were inferior in every way that mattered. He'd seen that look 1,000 times before, from 1,000 different aliens. My apologies, Your Majesty, Tyler said quietly. His voice was steady, dignified even. Then he turned and pulled his broken cart out of the throne room, the laughter following him down the corridor. He didn't head back to storage. Instead, Tyler found himself walking toward the maintenance tunnels, the oldest part of the ship that nobody else ever visited. Down there, in the dim emergency lighting, he could be alone with his thoughts. Down there, he could escape the constant reminder of his place in this grand empire. Tyler had been working these tunnels for months, and he'd noticed something strange. The walls were covered in markings, ancient symbols carved deep into the metal. They weren't Valkyrie writing. They weren't from any species he recognized. But somehow, they felt familiar. Like something from old Earth stories, from the myths his grandmother used to tell him before bed. He ran his hand along one of the carvings, tracing the pattern with his fingers. It looked almost like a wing, or maybe a flame. The metal was cold under his touch, and for a moment, Tyler could have sworn he felt something else. A warmth. A presence. Like something was waiting, listening, ready to answer. But that was crazy. Tyler shook his head and sat down on his overturned cart, alone in the darkness, trying to forget the sound of the Emperor's laughter. 3 days after the throne room incident, Tyler found himself back in the maintenance tunnels. A wall panel had cracked near section 12, and coolant was leaking through. It was a simple repair job, the kind he could do with his eyes closed. But when he pulled the damaged panel away, he stopped breathing for a moment. Behind the panel were more of those symbols. Dozens of them, carved in intricate patterns that spiraled across the entire wall. They were beautiful in a strange way, flowing like water or fire, each line connecting to the next in designs that seemed to tell a story. Tyler had seen pieces of these markings before, scattered throughout the tunnels. But never this many in one place. Never this clear. He reached out and touched one of the symbols, tracing its path with his fingertips. The metal hummed slightly under his touch, or maybe he was imagining it. The symbol looked like a creature with wings spread wide, its body coiled and powerful. Tyler had seen something like this before, back on Earth. In books about mythology. In old paintings from cultures that span the entire globe. Dragons. These symbols looked like dragons. That seemed impossible though. Dragons were Earth legends, stories humans told each other for thousands of years. Chinese dragons, European dragons, serpents from South American myths. Every culture had them, but they were just fantasy. They had nothing to do with alien civilizations or starships or the Valkyrie Empire. Tyler sat down on the floor, his repair work forgotten. He pulled out his personal tablet and started searching through Earth's historical databases. The images came up quickly. Dragon carvings from ancient China. Norse serpents coiled around the world. Mayan feathered serpents. Celtic dragons guarding treasure. And there, in every single one, he saw the same flowing patterns, the same way the wings curved, the same spiral in the tail. The same patterns that covered the wall in front of him. His hands were shaking slightly as he held the tablet up, comparing the images. It was too similar to be coincidence. But what did it mean? Had humans somehow been here before, carving these symbols into a ship that wouldn't exist for thousands of years? That made no sense. Or had whoever built this place somehow visited Earth, leaving behind stories that became human legends? Tyler stood up and grabbed his mop from his cart. It was a stupid impulse, but he couldn't help himself. He dipped the mop head in his cleaning solution and used it to trace one of the larger symbols on the wall, following the carved lines with the wet strands. The solution made the grooves more visible, highlighting the pattern. For just a second, the symbol glowed. A faint blue-white light that pulsed once and then faded. Tyler jumped back, dropping the mop. His heart hammered in his chest. He stared at the wall, waiting for something else to happen. Waiting for an alarm to sound or the ship to shake or guards to come running. Nothing. Just silence and the usual hum of the ship's engines. Tyler picked up his mop slowly, his hands still trembling. He looked at the symbol again. Had he really seen it glow, or was he so tired from double shifts that he was hallucinating? He reached out with one finger and touched the carving again. The metal was cool and normal. No humming. No warmth. Just ordinary ship plating. He checked the time on his tablet. He'd been down here for over an hour, and he still hadn't finished the repair. Tyler shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He needed to focus. He needed to stop seeing patterns that probably weren't there and just do his job. But over the next few days, Tyler couldn't stop thinking about those symbols. During his breaks, he searched for more information about the ship itself. The Eternal Dominion was old by Valkyrie standards, almost 300 years. It had been built in the Outer Reach sector, constructed around the frame of an even older station. That station, according to the records Tyler could access, had been abandoned when the Valkyrie found it. Nobody knew who built it originally. The species was extinct, their name lost to history. The Valkyrie had simply gutted the old structure and built their flagship around its bones. They'd kept some of the original architecture because it was sturdy, but they'd never bothered to study the markings on the walls. They'd dismissed them as primitive art, meaningless decoration from a dead civilization. Tyler started mapping the symbols during his off hours. He'd take photos with his tablet, trying to piece together the larger patterns. Some of the carvings showed creatures in flight. Others showed figures that might have been people, standing with their arms raised toward the sky. And throughout all of it, there were the dragons, winding through the scenes like threads through fabric. One night, Tyler fell asleep in his small quarters with his tablet still displaying the images. He dreamed, and the dreams were vivid in a way his dreams usually weren't. He saw vast creatures made of light and energy, their wings spanning distances that could swallow moons. They moved through space itself, swimming through the darkness like fish through water. And they were singing, though singing wasn't quite the right word. It was more like reality itself was vibrating with their presence. In the dream, one of the creatures turned to look directly at Tyler. Its eyes were ancient beyond measure, filled with sadness and hope and patience. When it spoke, Tyler didn't hear words. He felt them, like they were carved directly into his soul. "We remember the children of Earth," the voice said. "We have been waiting for you to remember us." Tyler woke up gasping, his sheets soaked with sweat. His quarters were dark and quiet, just like always. But the dream didn't fade the way dreams usually did. It stayed sharp and clear in his memory, as real as anything he'd experienced while awake. He sat on the edge of his bed, his head in his hands. This was crazy. He was losing it, seeing meaning in random scratches on old walls, having vivid dreams about mythical creatures. The stress of working on this ship, the constant mockery, the isolation from other humans, it was all getting to him. But Tyler couldn't shake the feeling that something was calling to him from those ancient symbols. Something that had been waiting a very long time. Something that recognized him, even if he didn't understand why. The next morning, Tyler requested access to the restricted archives. He told the Valkyrie administrator that he needed to check the original construction records for the maintenance tunnels. It was a thin excuse, but the administrator barely looked up from his work. Humans requesting information wasn't considered a threat. Humans were too simple to understand anything important anyway. Tyler spent hours going through the old files. Most of it was engineering data, structural surveys, nothing useful. But buried deep in the archives, he found a single report from the Valkyrie research team that had first surveyed the ancient station. The report was brief, dismissive. But there was one line that made Tyler's breath catch. The primitive inhabitants appear to have worshipped guardian entities, possibly as a form of ancestor veneration. The carved representations show no technological sophistication. Recommend salvage operations proceed without further archaeological study. Guardian entities. Not gods. Not demons. Guardians. Protectors. And according to the report, there were similar ruins scattered across a dozen systems, all showing the same symbols, all left by the same mysterious species. All abandoned around the same time period. Right around the time that humanity was developing agriculture and building its first cities. Right around the time that dragon legends started appearing in every human culture across Earth. Tyler leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. What if the legends weren't just stories? What if something had actually visited Earth thousands of years ago? What if those dragons, those guardians, had been real? And what if they were still out here somewhere, sleeping in forgotten places, waiting for someone to wake them up? The alarm started screaming at 0400 hours, ripping Tyler from a restless sleep. Red emergency lights flooded his quarters as the ship's automated voice announced what everyone already knew from the violent shaking. They were under attack. Tyler pulled on his maintenance uniform and stumbled into the corridor. Valkyrie soldiers were running in formation toward their battle stations, their armor clanking with each step. Nobody spared him a glance. In the chaos of battle, humans were even more invisible than usual. He made his way to the maintenance control room, where a Valkyrie supervisor was barking orders at 3 other human workers. The situation was bad. A faction called the Kreth Collective had ambushed the fleet with twice as many ships as intelligence had predicted. The Eternal Dominion was taking heavy fire, and multiple systems were failing across the ship. "You," the supervisor pointed at Tyler. "Deck 9, sections 14 through 20. Hull breaches detected. Seal them if you can." Then he turned away, already focused on the next crisis. Tyler grabbed an emergency repair kit and headed for the elevators. The ship shuddered around him as another blast struck the shields. The lights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, he heard the sound of groaning metal and rushing air. This wasn't a minor skirmish. This was a real battle, the kind where ships got torn apart. He reached Deck 9 and immediately saw the damage. A blast had ripped through the outer hull, exposing 3 rooms to vacuum. Emergency barriers had sealed off the breaches, but they were temporary at best. Tyler got to work, welding reinforcement plates and patching the smaller holes. His hands moved automatically, years of training taking over while his mind wandered. Another massive impact shook the ship. Tyler was thrown against the wall, his welding torch spinning away across the floor. The emergency lighting went out completely for 5 seconds before the backup systems kicked in. When they did, the light was dimmer, more orange than red. That wasn't good. Orange emergency lighting meant they were down to tertiary power. The ship was dying. Tyler's communicator crackled to life. It was the supervisor's voice, but there was something different about it. Something that might have been fear. All non-essential personnel, evacuate to the pods. Repeat, all non-essential personnel to evacuation pods immediately. Tyler stood up and looked around at the damaged corridor. Non-essential personnel. That meant him. That meant all the humans. He started moving toward the nearest evacuation station, following the glowing floor strips. Other workers were emerging from various sections, all heading the same direction. He recognized a few faces. Amy from water reclamation. Jake from the kitchens. Linda who worked in the recycling center. They reached the evacuation bay together, a large room lined with escape pods. But the doors were sealed. A Velkari guard stood in front of them, his weapon drawn. "What's going on?" Jake asked. "We were told to evacuate." The guard's expression was cold. "These pods are reserved for essential crew only. You will wait here until the situation is resolved." "But the announcement said," Amy started. "I know what it said," the guard interrupted. "My orders come from the bridge. You will wait here." Tyler felt something cold settle in his stomach. He understood. The Velkari were abandoning ship, but they weren't wasting escape pods on humans. If the ship survived, great. If it didn't, well, cleaning crews were easy to replace. The guard left, sealing the door behind him. The room suddenly felt very small. Around Tyler, the other humans were starting to panic, their voices rising as the reality of the situation sank in. They were trapped on a dying ship. Another explosion, closer this time. The whole room tilted to one side. Someone screamed. Tyler grabbed a support beam to keep from falling. Through the small window in the door, he could see Velkari officers running past, heading for the working evacuation bays. Nobody was coming back for them. Tyler made a decision. "The maintenance tunnels," he said, loud enough to cut through the panic. "There's an access point behind that panel. We can get to the older sections of the ship. The structure is more stable there." "What good does that do?" Linda asked. "We'll still be on the ship when it explodes." Tyler didn't have an answer for that. But staying here, waiting to die, wasn't an option. "Follow me or don't. I'm not waiting here." He pried open the access panel and climbed into the tunnel. Behind him, he heard others following. Not everyone. Some chose to stay, hoping the guard would come back. Tyler understood that too. Hope was a powerful thing, even when it was foolish. The tunnel was dark and getting darker as more systems failed. Tyler used his work light to guide the way, leading the small group deeper into the ship's core. The walls here were older, covered in those ancient symbols he'd been studying. They almost seemed to glow in the dim light, though that might have been his imagination. The group reached section 12, where Tyler had found the largest concentration of carvings. The room shook again, and this time Tyler heard something tear. Somewhere above them, the hull was rupturing. They didn't have much time. Tyler stood in front of the wall covered in symbols. He could feel the others watching him, confused about why he'd led them to what looked like a dead end. He could hear Amy crying quietly. Jake was praying under his breath. Tyler was out of options. Out of logic. Out of rational plans. All he had left was a crazy dream and symbols on a wall that might mean nothing at all. He grabbed his mop from his cart. The same mop he'd used to trace the patterns before. The same mop that had been with him during that humiliating moment in the throne room. His hands were steady now. Calm. Like some part of him knew this was always how it was going to end. Tyler dipped the mop in cleaning solution and began to trace the symbols. Not just one this time. All of them. Every wing, every coil, every spiraling pattern. He moved with purpose, following the carvings as they wrapped around the room. The wet trails began to glow, faint at first, then brighter. Blue-white light that pulsed in rhythm with something Tyler could feel but not hear. "What are you doing?" Jake whispered, but Tyler didn't answer. He couldn't stop now. The symbols were blazing now, so bright everyone had to shield their eyes. The metal walls began to hum. Then vibrate. Then sing with a frequency that made Tyler's bones ache. He pressed his hand against the largest carving, the one that showed a dragon with its wings spread wide. "Please," Tyler said, and he wasn't even sure who he was talking to. "We need help. We're dying out here. If you're real, if you ever existed, we need you now." The wall exploded with light. Not an explosion that destroyed. An explosion that opened. Reality itself seemed to tear apart, folding back like paper to reveal something beyond. Something vast. Something ancient. They came through in silence. Massive beings that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist according to every law of physics Tyler had ever learned. Their bodies were crystalline, refracting light in ways that hurt to look at. Their wings stretched across impossible distances. And their eyes, those ancient eyes from his dream, fixed on Tyler with recognition. The lead dragon lowered its head until it was level with Tyler's face. When it spoke, the words resonated inside his skull, bypassing his ears entirely. "You called, Keeper. We answer. The children of Earth have not been forgotten. The old pact remains unbroken." Behind Tyler, someone dropped to their knees. He heard Linda gasp. Jake had stopped praying, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Tyler should have been terrified. He should have been questioning his sanity. But instead, he felt something else entirely. He felt like he'd finally found something that had been missing his entire life. Like a piece of himself that had been sleeping was suddenly awake. "Can you help us?" Tyler asked, surprised at how steady his voice was. "Can you save this ship?" The dragon's laugh was like music from the birth of stars. "Little Keeper, we can do far more than that." The dragons moved through the ship like they were swimming through water instead of solid metal. Tyler watched as they simply passed through walls and barriers as if those things didn't exist. The other humans huddled behind him, their eyes wide with wonder and fear. Amy was gripping Jake's arm so tight her knuckles were white. Tyler felt the dragon's presence in his mind again, warm and ancient. "Stay here, Keeper. We will shield your vessel. There is much to discuss, but first we must deal with the immediate threat." Then they were gone, flowing upward through the decks toward the battle raging outside. Tyler's communicator suddenly crackled to life with confused voices from all over the ship. Valkyrie officers shouting about readings that made no sense. Sensors detecting energy signatures that shouldn't be possible. Something massive appearing on all their screens. Tyler led his group to a nearby observation port, one of the small windows that looked out into space. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The dragons were outside now, visible against the star field. They had grown, or maybe they'd always been that large and had compressed themselves to fit inside the ship. Each one was the size of a cruiser, their crystalline bodies catching the light from nearby stars and scattering it in rainbow patterns. Their wings stretched for miles, rippling with energy that Tyler's eyes couldn't quite process. The Kreth Collective's fleet was still firing on the Eternal Dominion, but their weapons weren't reaching the ship anymore. The dragons had formed a barrier, a shield of pure energy that absorbed every blast. Tyler watched as one of the enemy ships fired a massive plasma cannon, the kind of weapon that could crack a moon. The blast hit the nearest dragon and simply disappeared, absorbed into its crystalline body like water into sand. Then the dragons responded. They didn't attack the enemy ships. They didn't need to. They simply moved, their massive forms flowing through space in patterns that made the enemy fleet scatter. Tyler realized he was watching something beyond warfare. The dragons weren't fighting. They were showing the Kreth Collective something so far beyond their understanding that the only rational response was terror. The enemy fleet was retreating now, their ships jumping to faster-than-light speeds as quickly as their engines could charge. Within minutes, they were gone. The battle was over. Tyler's communicator exploded with noise. Every channel was active, voices overlapping in confusion and shock. Through the chaos, he heard one voice rise above the others. Emperor Vexna himself, broadcasting on the general frequency. "What in the name of the ancestors is happening? Someone tell me what those things are. All senior officers to the bridge immediately." The dragon's voice filled Tyler's mind again. "The one who rules this vessel demands answers. We should provide them. Come, Keeper. Bring your companions. It is time the proud ones learned a lesson in humility." Tyler looked at the other humans. They were all staring at him like he might have answers. He didn't, not really. But he nodded anyway. "Let's go. Stay close to me." They made their way through the ship toward the bridge. The corridors were full of Valkyrie crew members, all of them looking shaken and confused. Some of them noticed Tyler and his group passing by. For the first time since Tyler had boarded this ship, none of them laughed. None of them made jokes. They just stared with something that might have been fear. The bridge was in chaos when they arrived. Officers were shouting at their stations, trying to make sense of readings that shouldn't exist. Emperor Vexna stood in the center of it all, his golden robes disheveled, his face a mask of confusion and barely controlled panic. When the doors opened and Tyler walked in, the entire bridge went silent. "You," Vexna said, his voice low and dangerous. "The janitor. What are you doing on my bridge?" Before Tyler could answer, reality folded again. The dragons flowed through the walls, materializing on the bridge itself. They filled the space, their massive forms somehow fitting into a room that should have been far too small. The Valkyrie officers scrambled backward, some of them drawing weapons that everyone knew would be useless. The lead dragon settled in front of Emperor Vexna. The Emperor, to his credit, didn't run. He stood his ground, though Tyler could see him trembling. The dragon spoke, and this time everyone could hear it. The voice echoed through the bridge, through the ship, through the minds of every being aboard. "We are the Guardians. We are the Wardens of the Ancient Pact. We are what your ancestors found sleeping in the ruins of our resting places, though they lacked the wisdom to understand what they had discovered." Vexna's eyes went wide. "The ruins. The station we built this ship around. That was yours." "One of many," the dragon confirmed. "We have slept across this galaxy for 3,000 years, waiting for those who remember the old ways. Waiting for our keepers to call us home." "Keepers?" Vexna looked at Tyler, and Tyler saw understanding dawn in the Emperor's eyes. "The human. You're saying this cleaning creature commands you?" The dragon's laugh was like crystal bells. "Commands? No. We are not slaves to be commanded. We are partners. Companions. Guardians who answer to those who share our bond. And yes, this human is a keeper. His bloodline is old, descended from those who walked with us in ages past." Tyler felt every eye on the bridge turn to him. The same janitor they'd all mocked. The same human who'd been left to die in the evacuation bay. Standing calmly among beings of incomprehensible power who called him keeper. Vexna's face went through several expressions. Disbelief. Denial. Then slowly, reluctantly, acceptance. "I don't understand. Humans are primitive. They have no special abilities. No advanced technology. How can they possibly?" "You measure worth by the wrong standards," another dragon interrupted. "You value weapons and conquest. Force and domination. But there are older powers in this universe. The power to form bonds across species and time. The power to remember what others have forgotten. The power to hope when hope seems lost." The dragon's eyes fixed on Vexna. "These are humanity's gifts. These are why we chose them as our companions millennia ago." Tyler found his voice. His hands had stopped shaking. Standing among the dragons, he felt more confident than he ever had before. "Your Majesty, the dragons have offered to protect this ship. To protect everyone on it. But there are conditions." Vexna's jaw tightened. "Conditions? You dare to make demands of me?" "Not me," Tyler said quietly. "Them. The beings who just saved your life and the lives of everyone on this ship. Maybe you should listen." The bridge was so quiet Tyler could hear his own heartbeat. Emperor Vexna, the ruler of 17 star systems, the conqueror of dozens of species, was being challenged by a janitor. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Finally, Vexna spoke. His voice was strained, like the words physically hurt. "What are your conditions?" Tyler took a breath. "Humans are not disposable. We're not less than you. We work on your ships, clean your stations, keep your systems running. And when there's danger, we don't get left behind to die. The dragons will help protect the Valkyrie Empire, but only if you treat all your people with basic dignity. Including us." "And if I refuse?" Vexna asked, though his voice had lost its edge. The lead dragon moved closer, until its face was inches from the Emperor. "Then we leave. We return to our sleep. And the next time your enemies come, you will face them alone. The choice is yours, Emperor. But choose wisely." Vexna looked around his bridge. At his officers, all of them waiting for his decision. At the dragons, massive and patient. At Tyler, standing calm and steady. The Emperor's shoulders sagged slightly. "Very well," he said finally. "I accept your terms." Tyler nodded. "Then we have a deal." News traveled fast in the galaxy. Within days, every major civilization had heard the story. The Valkyrie Empire, one of the most powerful military forces in known space, had been saved by a human janitor who could summon ancient beings of impossible power. The story sounded like fiction. But the sensor logs were real. The testimony of hundreds of Valkyrie witnesses was real. And most convincing of all, the dragons themselves were real. Tyler stood in what used to be a storage room on Deck 7. It had been converted into his new quarters, though calling it quarters felt strange. It was 3 times the size of his old room, with actual windows that looked out into space. He still wasn't used to it. Part of him wanted to refuse the upgrade, to keep his small maintenance quarters. But the dragons had insisted. A keeper needed space for visitors, they said. Space for teaching. His communicator buzzed. It was a message from Amy, one of the humans who'd been with him that day in the maintenance tunnels. She was working on a Valkyrie mining station near the outer reach, and she'd found something. Symbols on the walls of an abandoned shaft. Dragon carvings, just like the ones on the Eternal Dominion. Tyler smiled. Amy was the 7th human to contact him this week with similar news. Jake had found symbols on a cargo hauler. Linda discovered them in the basement of a Valkyrie government building. Across the Empire, humans who'd spent years invisible and ignored were suddenly seeing what had always been there. The dragons had left their marks everywhere, sleeping in forgotten places, waiting. You should answer her, the lead dragon's voice filled his mind. Tyler had learned her name now. Starweaver, though that was just an approximation in human language. Her real name was something his brain couldn't quite process, a concept rather than a word. I will, Tyler said out loud. He'd gotten used to talking to Starweaver this way, though other people found it odd to watch him have one-sided conversations. But we need to be careful. Not everyone who finds the symbols should try to wake a dragon. Some people aren't ready. You are learning wisdom, young keeper. Starweaver materialized in the room, her crystalline form shrinking to fit the space. She was the size of a large horse now, small enough to move comfortably through the ship's corridors. The bond between dragon and keeper is not just about power. It requires trust. Understanding. A willingness to see beyond what your eyes show you. Tyler sat down at his new desk and started composing a reply to Amy. He'd written dozens of these messages now, always with the same advice. Study the symbols. Learn their patterns. Listen to your dreams. And most importantly, don't try to force anything. If a dragon wanted to wake, it would. If it didn't, all the tracing and calling in the world wouldn't matter. A knock on his door interrupted his typing. Tyler called for them to enter, and Emperor Vexner walked in. No guards. No attendants. Just the Emperor himself, looking older and more tired than Tyler had ever seen him. Your Majesty, Tyler stood up, but Vexner waved him back down. Please. No formality. I came to speak with you, not as Emperor to subject, but as one person to another. Vexner looked around the room, his eyes lingering on Starweaver. May I sit? Of course, Tyler gestured to the other chair. This was the 3rd time Vexner had visited in the past 2 weeks. The first time had been stiff and formal. The second time, slightly less so. This time, the Emperor actually looked like he wanted to be here. Vexner sat heavily. I've been reviewing the employment records for all human workers across the Empire. Do you know how many there are? No, Tyler admitted. 43,000, Vexner said. 43,000 humans keeping our ships running, our stations clean, our systems functional. And until 2 weeks ago, I couldn't have told you a single one of their names. He looked at Tyler. I knew yours only because you embarrassed me in the throne room. Tyler didn't know what to say to that, so he stayed quiet. I've issued new regulations, Vexner continued. Equal pay for equal work. Access to evacuation systems. Representation in labor disputes. It's not enough, I know. But it's a start. He paused. Some of my advisors think I'm being too generous. That humans will take advantage. That this will weaken the Empire. And what do you think? Tyler asked. I think, Vexner said slowly, that I spent 300 years believing strength meant crushing those beneath you. That power meant forcing others to bend to your will. And then I watched you stand in front of ancient beings who could destroy this entire ship with a thought, and they called you Keeper. They chose you. Not because you were strong or powerful, but because you understood something I didn't. What's that? That real strength isn't about domination. It's about connection. About building something together instead of taking from each other. Vexner met Tyler's eyes. You could have used the dragons as weapons. You could have demanded revenge for every insult, every humiliation. Instead, you asked for dignity. For basic fairness. That's not weakness. That's wisdom I'm still learning. Tyler felt something in his chest tighten. You laughed at me in that throne room. You and everyone else. You thought I was nothing. I know, Vexner said quietly. And I was wrong. I see that now. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air between them. Tyler had imagined this moment 100 times, always with him being cold and dismissive. But now that it was happening, he found he didn't want that. What good would more anger do? Apology accepted, Tyler said finally. And thank you for the new regulations. It means a lot to people like me. Vexner stood to leave, then paused at the door. The dragons. They really could destroy us, couldn't they? If they wanted to. Yes, Tyler said honestly. But they won't. Because you wouldn't let them. They don't need my permission for anything, Tyler corrected. But no, they won't. That's not what they are. They're guardians, not conquerors. They only fight when there's no other choice. Vexner nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand why they chose humanity as their companions. Then he left, the door sliding shut behind him. 3 months later, Tyler stood in a training room with 15 other humans. They'd all found dragon symbols in various locations across the Empire. Some had already made contact with sleeping guardians. Others were still learning, still studying the old patterns. Tyler moved between them, offering guidance where he could. Remember, he told a young woman named Rachel who worked on a station near the frontier, it's not about forcing the connection. It's about being open to it. The dragons recognize something in us, something that goes back thousands of years. You don't create that bond. You remember it. Rachel nodded, her fingers tracing a holographic display of the symbol she'd found. I had the dream last night. The one you described. Wings made of starlight. That's good, Tyler smiled. That means one of them is reaching out to you. Keep listening. His communicator buzzed. Another message, this time from a human working on a diplomatic station in neutral space. More symbols. More potential keepers waking up to their heritage. Tyler looked around the room at all these people who'd spent years being told they were nothing special. Being treated as invisible. And now they were discovering they carried the legacy of beings older than most civilizations. It was overwhelming sometimes. Beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Starweaver's voice touched his mind. You're tired, Keeper. You push yourself too hard. There's a lot to do, Tyler thought back. There always will be, she replied gently. But even keepers need rest. Even teachers need to be students sometimes. Tyler finished the class and headed back to his quarters. But he didn't go straight there. Instead, he took a detour through the maintenance tunnels. The same tunnels where this had all started. He found his old cart, still there with its bent wheel. His mop was propped against the wall where he'd left it. Tyler picked up the mop, feeling its familiar weight. So much had changed in 3 months. He had a new title now. Keeper. Ambassador. Teacher. He spent his days training other humans, consulting with the dragons, attending meetings with Velkari officials who actually listened when he spoke. But he was still Tyler Brooks. Still the guy who knew how to fix a coolant leak and seal a hull breach. Still the janitor who'd spent years pushing a cart through these corridors. He spent an hour cleaning the old section, mopping the floors like he used to. It was peaceful. Meditative. And when he traced those ancient symbols one more time, just for old time's sake, they glowed warmly, like greeting an old friend. Above him, through the levels of the ship, life continued. Velkari and humans working side by side now, not as masters and servants, but as colleagues. It wasn't perfect yet. There was still prejudice, still resentment, still a long way to go. But it was better. Every day, a little better. And scattered across the galaxy, more dragons were waking. More humans were remembering. More connections were being formed between beings who'd been separated for 3,000 years. Tyler smiled as he pushed his cart back toward storage. The bent wheel still squeaked, a familiar sound that reminded him of where he'd come from. He'd never forget that. Never forget what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be considered less than nothing. Because remembering that made him a better keeper. Made him fight harder for dignity and fairness. Made him understand that true strength wasn't about power over others. It was about lifting others up, about building bonds instead of walls, about showing compassion even when the universe told you not to. The dragons had chosen well, Tyler thought. Not because humans were special or superior. But because humans understood something essential. That the smallest act of kindness could change everything. That hope could survive even in the darkest places. And that sometimes, the most important person in the galaxy was the one everyone else had overlooked. Tyler Brooks, Dragon Keeper and Janitor, went back to his quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students, new discoveries. But tonight, he was content.